Hello, friends. We are interested in the geography of our views. So please like and write in the comments from which city are you watching us? And were there loud stories of betrayal in your city? Share your stories with us. Maybe the next betrayal story will be from your city. And we start. The house on Willow Street was too quiet, so quiet that the silence rang in your ears like a harbinger of storm. The two-story colonial mansion with white shutters and a perfectly manicured lawn looked like a postcard from the American dream. In a cold as sack where neighbors' lawnmowers whirred on weekends and children rode bicycles. The Morgan home seemed a picture of well-being. A Tesla in the driveway, a swing on the porch, soft light from the windows. But inside the air was thick with unspoken words, and Alex Morgan felt it more than ever. Alex was 42. He sat at the kitchen island, staring at his laptop, where Excel spreadsheets twinkled like stars in the night sky. A senior accountant at Pinnacle Enterprises, a major logistics corporation, he was a master of numbers, a man who found solace in the knowledge that every number had a place, every error an explanation. He had thin, wire-rimmed glasses, a face that was easily forgotten, and a wrinkle between his eyebrows that deepened with each passing year. His world was orderly, predictable. But lately, life seemed like an equation he couldn't solve. Dinner is ready. Kate's voice came from the dining room, sharp as the flick of a switch. Caitlin Morgan, his wife, stood at the table, her blonde hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, and her white linen dress looking like it had just come out of the dry cleaners. At 38, Kate was a woman who turned heads, sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of a winter sky, a smile that could sell anything. She was a real estate agent, the type who could convince a client to buy a house with a leaky roof simply by tilting her head and laughing at the right moment. But today her face was cold, her movements mechanical, as she placed a plate of baked salmon and asparagus on the table. "Thanks," Alex muttered, closing his laptop. He glanced at Sophie, Kate's 16-year-old daughter from her first marriage, who was already sitting at the table, her head glued to her phone. Sophie inherited her mother's angular features, but her style was challenging. Dark hair with purple streaks, a baggy hoodie, a pierced eyebrow. She didn't look up as Alex sat down, her fingers flying across the screen, tapping the keys. Sophie put the phone away, Kate said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Sophie rolled her eyes, throwing her phone onto the table with a loud thud. "God, come on." Alex was silent, his fork hovering over his plate. It was their usual routine. Kate's orders, Sophie's rebellion, and his own silent retreat. He had been in Sophie's life for 8 years, since she was a skinny girl with braces who called him Mr. Alex. Now she barely noticed him, and he didn't know how to break through the wall of her teenage coldness. He wasn't her father. Her real father, Mike, a contractor with rough hands and infrequent visits, had long since turned into a child support check and stingy WhatsApp messages. Alex tried to be someone for Sophie, but it was like building a bridge across an abyss without drawings. Dinner passed in almost complete silence. Only the scraping of forks on plates and the low hum of the refrigerator broke the silence. Kate sipped white wine, her gaze fixed somewhere outside the window into the dark garden. Alex looked at her, trying to see the woman he had once loved, the one who laughed at his ridiculous jokes, danced with him in their first apartment to an old Frank Sinatra record. Kate disappeared, giving way to this stranger whose movements were precise, like an actress playing the role of an ideal wife. "Hard day?" he asked, trying to cling to something that could connect them. Kate looked at him, her eyes as cold as ice on a lake. "As usual, showed a house in Brentwood. Clients are complete idiots. Do you want me to help you with something?" He extended his hand across the table, metaphorically, of course. She shook her head, a tight smile tugging at her lips. "I can handle it, Alex. I can handle it." This was her refrain. That's what she said when Sophie was caught vaping in the school bathroom, when the roof leaked during a hurricane, when he suggested couples therapy 6 months ago. Alex retreated, as always, but the words remained a wall that he could not overcome. After dinner, Sophie disappeared upstairs, her door slamming so hard it echoed through the house. Kate cleared away the plates, her movements quick, almost irritated, as Alex loaded the dishwasher. They warped silently, like a well-oiled machine, but without spark, without heat. He noticed her glance at the phone, her thumb hovering over the screen before she slipped it into her dress pocket. "Do you have to get up early tomorrow?" he asked, wiping his hands with a towel. "Yes," she answered without looking at him, "and I'll stay late. Drinks with the client after the transaction." "Understood." His voice was even, but something sank in his stomach. Kate's late evenings became a regular routine: dinners with clients, networking, house showings that lasted until midnight. He didn't ask questions. He didn't want to be that husband who makes a scene over trifles. But doubts were like a splinter that he could not pull out. Kate disappeared into her office, a small room off the living room where she kept her contracts, vision boards, and sticky notes with affirmations like "take everything from life." Alex remained in the kitchen. The silence rolled in like fog. He thought about pouring some whiskey something to dull the edges of the evening, but instead his feet carried him toward the living room where the TV flickered with the sound off, showing a report on the stock market indexes. He didn't sit down. His gaze fell on Kate's office door, ajar just enough to let in a thin sliver of light. He shouldn't have gone there. He knew this even as he crossed the living room, his steps almost silent on the expensive parquet floor. Kate guarded her office like a fortress. Drawers were locked. Her laptop required a password. Even her diary was locked. But today the door was open and something curiosity, suspicion, instinct pulled him forward. The office smelled of her perfume, a sharp floral scent that he had once loved, but now associated with her aloofness. The desk was immaculate, a stack of contracts on the left, a framed photo of Sophie at her high school graduation on the right. No photographs of him, he noted, and the thought stabbed like a needle. He wasn't going to rummage. He just needed a pencil, or so he told himself. He opened the top drawer of his desk, expecting to find pens, paper clips, anything. Instead, there was a single sheet of paper folded in half, its edges so crisp it looked like it had just been printed. His fingers froze, then slowly unfolded the sheet. His heart began to pound, as if he knew that he was about to find something that was better not to see. The letterhead bore the name of the law firm, Harrington and Weiss. The document was called Confidentiality Agreement. Kate's signature was scrawled across the bottom next to the date 3 weeks ago. And below is another signature, Bradley Cross, Vice President, Legal, Pinnacle Enterprises. Alex froze. Bradley Cross. He knew the name. Not up close, not in person, but enough to send a cold pang through your chest. Cross was the star of their corporation's legal department, a man with a reputation as a shark, charismatic, ambitious, with a smile that could disarm or destroy. Alex had seen him at corporate events, tall, gray at the temples, wearing suits that cost more than Alex's monthly salary. They never communicated their departments were worlds apart, but Cross's name thundered on the sidelines, like the name of a man who always gets what he wants. He reread the document, his accounting brain latching on to the details. It was a standard template. Kate agreed not to disclose confidential information related to a certain deal. But what kind of deal? Kate was a real estate agent, not a lawyer or corporate player. Why is her signature next to Cross's? And why is this document hidden in a drawer and not in her work folders? His eyes scanned the text again, picking out the details, obligations of the parties, confidential information, validity period 6 months. Nothing specific, nothing that would explain why this leaf was here, but Cross's name was like a red flag, an alarm he couldn't ignore. He heard footsteps in the corridor and instinctively shoved the document back into the drawer, but did not slam it shut. His fingers trembled as he took out his phone and opened the camera. He didn't know why he was doing this. There was no plan, no conclusions, only an instinct that whispered, "Save it." He photographed the document twice to make sure the text was clear. Then he carefully folded the paper, returned it to its place, and closed the drawer, trying to keep everything looking as it was. "Alex," Kate's voice came from the living room, close, too close. He winced, his heart leaping into his throat. "Here," he answered, trying to keep his voice even. He stepped towards the door, hoping his face wouldn't show panic. Kate stood in the doorway of the office. Her eyes narrowed like a cat that had noticed movement. She was barefoot. Her dress had been replaced by a silk robe, but her posture remained tense, as if she were ready for battle. "What are you doing?" Her tone was low, almost threatening. Alex swallowed his hands, involuntarily clenching into fists. "I was looking for Scotch tape. I want to stick the printout to the monitor." Her gaze slid over the table, over the drawer he had just closed. For a second, he thought she knew that he had seen, that he had photographed. But she just crossed her arms, her lips curved into a cold half-smile. "The tape is in the bottom drawer," she said. "You know." "Yes, exactly. Forgot." He forced himself to smile, but it came out forced like a grimace. She looked at him for another second, her eyes like scanners looking for lies. Then she turned around, throwing over her shoulder. "I'm going to bed. Don't make any noise." He nodded, although she had already left. His breath came out in a soft hiss as he was left alone in the office. He didn't bother looking for the tape. Instead, he walked out, closing the door behind him and headed into the kitchen. There he poured out the whiskey he had been saving all evening and took a long sip, feeling the liquid burn his throat. His phone was on the table, and he opened the gallery, looking at the pictures of the document. Bradley Cross. Confidentiality agreement. Kate. He didn't draw any conclusions, not yet. But something in the depths of his consciousness, like a smoldering spark, began to flare up. He didn't know what kind of document it was that connected Kate and Cross, but he felt this was not just work. This is something more, something that can ruin their life. He finished his whiskey, looking out the dark window where his face was reflected the face of a man who had just stepped onto the edge of an abyss. And somewhere in the depths of his soul, a determination was born. He would find out the truth. Whatever it is, the silence in the Morgan house was not just the absence of sound. It was alive, tangible, like a shadow that creeps behind one's back. Once that night in Kate's office, when Alex had found the confidentiality agreement signed by Bradley Cross, that silence had become his companion. She followed him to the office, sat next to him in the car, whispered in his ears while he tried to sleep next to his wife, whose breathing now seemed foreign to him. But Alex was not a man who gave in to emotions. He was an accountant. His world consisted of numbers, logic, facts. And if a crack appears in his life, he will find its source. The numbers don't lie. The day after the discovery in the box, Alex came to the office earlier than usual. The Pinnacle Enterprises building downtown was a glass fortress, cold, impersonal, with mirrored windows reflecting the morning sky. His office on the 6th floor was cramped, cluttered with files and printouts, but it was here that he felt in his element. The computer hummed to life, and Alex entered his username, his fingers moving with practiced precision. He didn't know what he was looking for, but the confidentiality agreement with Bradley Cross's name and Kate's signature was like a beacon pointing him in the direction. He started with the company's database, an internal archive where financial reports, transactions, and contracts were stored. Access to most areas was restricted, but Alex, as a senior accountant, had privileges that he rarely used. He opened the financial transactions module, his eyes scanning the endless lines of numbers. This was his territory, debit, credit balance. There was no room for ambiguity here. He entered a query, filtering transactions from the last 6 months, and started digging. At first, nothing caught my eye. Usual payments, salaries, contracts with suppliers, tax deductions. But then he noticed an anomaly, a series of small transfers labeled as consulting services. The amounts were modest, from $5,000 to $10,000, but regular once a month, and they all went into the account of a company called Keystone Consulting. The name meant nothing to him, but something about these transactions made him hold his breath. He clicked on the details and froze. The payee was Caitlin Morgan. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Kate, his wife. Her name is in the database of Pinnacle Enterprises, a company she never worked for. He double-checked the data, thinking it was a mistake. But no, her full name, her bank account, her signature on the email confirmations. The payments began 4 months ago, shortly after the confidentiality agreement was signed, based on the date. Alex felt the blood pounding in his temples, but he suppressed his emotions. This is not the time to panic. He dug deeper. Keystone Consulting turned out to be registered as an LLC with an address in a neighboring state. The company's website, minimalistic, almost formulaic, talked about strategic business solutions and individual approach to clients. Nothing specific. Alex found the name of the contact person, Natalia Grace, consultant, but no mention of Kate. He took a screenshot of the page and saved it to an encrypted folder on his work computer. The next step was risky. He knew that access to certain financial flows, especially those related to the legal department, could leave a mark on the system. But curiosity, or rather the need to know, prevailed. He entered a request for internal transactions related to Bradley Cross. His name appeared on several documents: memoranda, approvals of expenses, signatures on contracts. Nothing out of the ordinary for a VP of legal. But then Alex noticed a hidden folder in the internal compensation section. Access to it required an additional password, which he did not have. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze falling on the photo on the table him, Kate and Sophie on the beach 2 years ago. Kate was laughing, her hair flying in the wind. Sophie was building a sandcastle. Alex then thought that this was happiness. Now he looked at the photo and saw only the facade. His fingers returned to the keyboard. He wasn't a hacker, but his years in accounting had taught him how to work around bureaucratic barriers. He tried the standard passwords that companies sometimes use for temporary access. Combinations of dates, names, internal codes. On the fifth attempt, Pinnacle 2024, the folder opened. Inside were files marked confidential payments. Alex clicked on the first document and felt the air leave his lungs. It was a payment register signed by Cross and marked agreed compensation. Keystone Consulting has resurfaced among the recipients. The amounts were higher than in the main database, up to $20,000 per transaction, and all of them were marked as special services. The notes to one of the transactions read, "Approved by B. Cross, Project Capital." Alex kept a copy of the register. His movements were mechanical, like a robot. He didn't know what Project Capital was, but the word stuck in his head like a thorn. He kept digging, downloading files, taking screenshots, organizing the data in his folder. Each document was like a piece of a puzzle that he could not yet put together, but which was already beginning to form a frightening picture. Kate received money from the company where he worked. Money approved by Bradley Cross. Money she never mentioned. He worked quickly, knowing that time was limited. The office began to come to life. Footsteps in the corridor, the clinking of coffee cups, the voices of colleagues. Alex closed the database, erased the query history, and logged out. His heart was pounding, but outwardly he remained calm, a man who was simply doing his job. He opened Excel and began transferring data manually, creating a table, dates, amounts, recipients, notes. This was his method, to put order into chaos, to turn the unknown into numbers. By lunchtime, he had a picture. In 4 months, Kate had received almost $80,000 from Keystone Consulting. The payments were made through intermediaries, but they were all connected to Pinnacle's legal department. Cross's name appeared too often for it to be a coincidence. Alex didn't know what that meant, but he knew one thing. His wife was hiding more than just a document from him. She hid a whole network of transactions in which his own company was involved. He closed his laptop and went outside to get some air. The cold April wind hit his face, but could not drive away the heat in his chest. He took out his phone and opened a photo of the confidentiality agreement he had taken. Kate's signature, Cross's signature date. He zoomed in on the image, peering at the details as if they could speak. His finger hovered over the screen as he noticed the small print at the bottom. Project Capital, confidentiality guaranteed. Same name, the same word as in the payment register. Alex felt the ground disappear from under his feet, but he forced himself to breathe. He was not ready to draw conclusions. Not yet, but his analytical mind was already working at full capacity, connecting the dots, building hypotheses. Kate, Cross, money, secrets. This was no accident. Returning to the office, he continued collecting evidence. He requested access to archived contracts, citing an audit that was not disputed. He found a few more documents that mentioned Keystone Consulting, but nowhere was there any direct reference to Kate. It was a shadow, a ghost in the system, and Alex knew he needed more data to understand what was happening. By the end of the day, his folder was full. Screenshots, copies of registers, photographs, tables. He transferred everything to a flash drive, which he hid in his jacket pocket. He didn't trust the cloud, not now that he felt like he might be being watched. It was paranoia, of course, but paranoia born of facts. When he returned home, Kate was in the living room, leafing through a real estate magazine. She looked up, her smile polite but empty. "Long day?" she asked, her voice smooth as silk. "Yes," he answered, looking into her eyes. "Lots of numbers." She nodded, turning back to the magazine. "The numbers are yours." Alex walked into the kitchen, his hand clutching the flash drive in his pocket. The numbers were his, and they told him that his wife was not who he thought she was. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he was going to go to the end. Because the numbers don't lie, and people, yes. The silence in the Morgan house became more than just a background for Alex. It turned into a weapon that he learned to wield. After finding a confidentiality agreement signed by Kate and Bradley Cross, and then unearthing suspicious payments in the Pinnacle Enterprises database, Alex knew he was on the verge of something big. His analytical mind, accustomed to sorting out chaos, was now working in hunter mode. He didn't know what exactly Kate was hiding, but the name Bradley Cross, vice president of his company's legal department, was a clue. And to open this lock, he needed an ally. Someone who could see where his own hands couldn't reach. Nathan Lawson was that man. They met in their freshman year at Berkeley when they were both scrawny freshmen buried in economics textbooks. Nathan was the complete opposite of Alex, loud with sarcastic humor and a habit of getting into arguments with professors. But behind his sharp tongue, he had a mind capable of dismantling any tax scheme. Now, almost 20 years later, Nathan worked as a tax analyst for the IRS in a department that specialized in corporate fraud. If anyone could help Alex dig deeper, it was him. Alex didn't immediately decide to call. He sat in his car, parked 2 blocks from the Pinnacle office, clutching his phone as if it might explode. It was the morning of Saturday, April 19th, and the city around him was waking up. Coffee shops were filling with people. Joggers flashed along the sidewalks. But for Alex, the world has narrowed to the phone screen and the name in contacts, Nathan L. He had not spoken to him for more than a year, the last time they had been in the city. The cross paths was at a high school reunion where Nathan joked about his exciting life as a taxman and complained about his divorce. Calling now, asking for help, meant opening Pandora's box, but Alex had no choice. He dialed the number. After 3 rings, a familiar voice was heard, hoarse with a slight mockery. "Alex Morgan, damn it. Are you alive, or is it your ghost calling?" Alex involuntarily smiled, despite the heaviness in his chest. "Alive. Bye." "For now" sounds ominous. Nathan chuckled. "What happened? Do you miss my lectures on capital gains taxes?" "I need your help," Alex said, getting down to business. He knew that Nathan didn't like small talk. This is a delicate matter. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then Nathan whistled. "Delicate, you say? So have you finally decided to leave your boring office and open a casino? Or is it personal?" Alex swallowed. "A little of this, a little of that. Can we meet?" "Not by phone." "Wow, conspiracy," Nathan said, but his tone became more serious. "Okay, I'm in the city. There's a bar on the corner of 5th and Elm, the Rusty Anchor. Is 6 o'clock okay?" "That'll do," Alex replied. "Thank you, Nathan." "Don't thank me until you've billed for the beer," Nathan said, and hung up. Alex put the phone on the passenger's seat and exhaled. He hadn't told Nathan anything specific, but he already felt like a traitor. Not Kate, not Pinnacle, but himself, a man who always avoided conflict, kept a low profile, and trusted numbers more than people. Now he was going against everything that made up his life, but there was nowhere to retreat. The Rusty Anchor was a cramped bar with wood paneling and the smell of spilled beer. Evening light filtered through the dim windows, painting the room in warm colors. But the atmosphere was heavy, as if the bar was keeping the secrets of its patrons. Nathan was already there, sitting at a corner table with a bottle of IPA in his hand. He looked much the same as he did at university. Thin, with unkempt brown hair and stubble that couldn't decide whether to be a beard or not. Only the wrinkles around his eyes revealed that he, like Alex, was already over 40. "You look like you're being audited by the IRS," Nathan said, as Alex sat down across from him. "What's the matter, old man?" Alex ordered whiskey, not because he was thirsty, but to gain time. He looked around the bar, checking for any familiar faces, a couple of men in work jackets at the counter, a woman in a business suit, her head buried in the phone. No one from Pinnacle. He turned to Nathan. I need to check on one person. He began, lowering his voice. Bradley Cross, Vice President of Legal at Pinnacle Enterprises. There are suspicions that he is involved in dubious financial transactions. Nathan squinted, taking a sip of his beer. Doubtful, you say? Is it that your boss screwed up and now you're digging under him? Or is it something more? Alex hesitated. He didn't want to drag Nathan into his personal drama, but he knew half-truths wouldn't work. This is more. I found documents that link him to my wife, payments, contracts, agreements. I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't seem like normal work. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharp as a blade. Your wife? Kate, right? He remembered her name, although he had only seen Kate once at Alex's wedding. Damn, old man, it's personal. I'm not asking you to meddle in my family life, Alex said quickly. I need facts. Numbers if Cross is doing something dirty. I want to know, and if Kate is involved in this. He paused, unable to finish. Nathan tapped his fingers on the bottle, his face thoughtful. Okay, he finally said, I don't ask questions, bye. But do you understand that if I start digging into the tax affairs of the vice president of a large company, this could come back to haunt me? For me, for you, for everyone. I understand, Alex nodded. That's why I'm here. You know how to do it quietly. Nathan chuckled, but there was a sparkle in his eyes, the same one that appeared at the university when he took on a difficult task. Kwai is my middle name. Tell me what you have. Alex took the flash drive out of his pocket and placed it on the table. Here's everything I've found. Payments through Keystone Consulting. Payment registers signed by Cross. Confidentiality agreement signed by him and Kate, and mentions some kind of project capital. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't seem like a normal corporate expense. Nathan took the flash drive and twirled it in his fingers as if it could speak. Keystone Consulting, you say, sounds like a typical shell company. These are used to hide money or launder it. And this Cross of yours, is he one of those who likes to play big? He's a shark, Alex said, remembering Cross at corporate parties, tall with gray hair at the temples, wearing $5,000 suits with a smile that could convince anyone of anything. If something happens at Pinnacle, he's at the center of it. Got it, Nathan nodded. I'll start with Keystone's tax returns. If they are fake, there will be holes. Then I'll check Cross's assets, accounts, transactions. The IRS sees more than you think, but it will take time, Alex. And if I find something, are you ready for it? Alex looked at his whiskey, which he had not touched. Is he ready? He didn't know, but he knew he couldn't stop. Yes, he said. I'm ready. Nathan put the flash drive in his pocket, then sit quietly. Don't go into databases. Don't call me every 5 minutes. I'll contact you when I have something to say. Thank you, Nathan, Alex said, his voice shaking. Don't thank me. Nathan waved him off. Just buy me another beer when this is over. They sat for a while longer, talking about trifles, football, old college stories, but they both knew it was just a disguise. Nathan didn't ask questions about Kate, didn't try to delve into personal matters, and for that Alex was grateful to him. As they said goodbye outside the bar, Nathan tapped him on the shoulder. Hold on, old man, he said, and don't do anything stupid. Alex nodded, but deep down he knew the nonsense had already begun. The following days were painful. Alex returned to his routine, the office, the house, dinners with Kate and Sophie, but now his every move was laced with suspicion. He looked at Kate, tried to detect signs of deception. In her smile, in the way she looked away, in her late returns home. She behaved as usual coldly, but without obvious failures. Sophie, as always, was immersed in her own world, headphones, phone, slamming door. But Alex felt like a stranger in his own home, like a spy waiting for a signal. He was careful in the office. He no longer accessed databases directly, knowing that it might attract attention. Instead, he focused on circumstantial evidence. He studied old Pinnacle reports, looked for references to Keystone Consulting in open sources, checked corporate memos. He found several old press releases that mentioned Cross as a key player in merger deals. Nothing specific, but enough to confirm that Cross was more than just a lawyer. He was a strategist, a man who moved the pieces on the chessboard. Nathan contacted me 4 days later, late in the evening. Alex was in his home office, a small room with a bookcase and an old desk where he sometimes worked on weekends. Kate was at another dinner with a client. Sophie was with a friend. The phone vibrated and Alex grabbed it when he saw Nathan's name. "Found something," Nathan said, without preamble. His voice was quiet but tense. "We'll see you tomorrow. Same bar, same table. At 7. "What exactly?" Alex asked, his heart pounding. "Not on the phone," Nathan snapped. "Come and grab a notebook. There will be something to talk about." The line went dead, and Alex was left sitting in the dark, staring at the screen. He didn't sleep that night, his thoughts swirling around Kate, Cross, money, Keystone. He imagined worst-case scenarios. Kate involved in corporate fraud, Cross, using her as a pawn, their marriage, which turned out to be just a decoration. But he pushed away these thoughts, forcing himself to focus on the facts. Nathan found something, and this something could become his weapon. The next evening, the Rusty Anchor was more crowded than last time. The hum of conversations, the clink of glasses, the smell of fried wings. Nathan was sitting in the same corner, but this time there was a folder in front of him, thin, but clearly heavy with its contents. He nodded to Alex, pointing to a chair. "You look even worse than last time," Nathan said, pushing the beer towards him. "Hold it, it will help." Alex sat up, his eyes glued to the folder. "What's there?" Nathan tapped his fingers on the table, his face serious. "I dug into Keystone Consulting. You were right, this is a shell company. Registered 2 years ago, no real assets, no employees, except for the nominal director, a certain Natalia Grace. She, by the way, is also a shadow, an address in Nevada, no traces on social networks. But here's what's interesting. Keystone didn't only receive money from Pinnacle. There are transfers from 3 other companies, all linked to offshore accounts in Cayman." Alex felt his throat tighten. "Offshores?" "Yeah." Nathan nodded. "And this is just the tip. I checked Cross. He has assets that he does not disclose. Property in Miami registered to a fictitious person. A yacht registered through a trust. And several bills that he did not declare. Dude lives beyond his means, Alex. His salary at Pinnacle is about $500,000 a year, but his expenses are closer to $2 million. Where does the money come from?" Alex asked, his voice hoarse. Nathan opened the folder and pulled out a printout. "This is where the fun begins. I found traces of Project Capital. This is the unofficial name for Pinnacle's internal operation. No public mentions, but there are hints in tax records. It looks like this is a scheme to withdraw funds through fake contracts. Keystone is one of the channels. And you're Kate." He fell silent, looking at Alex. "She received money through this scheme. Regularly, the last payment was 2 weeks ago, $15,000. Alex felt the world shrinking around him. He took the printout, his eyes running over the numbers, dates, amounts, accounts. Everything matched what he found in the Pinnacle database. But now it was not just suspicion. This was reality, black and white. "Why her?" he asked, almost in a whisper. "She's a real estate agent. What the hell is she doing in a corporate scheme?" Nathan shrugged, but his gaze was sympathetic. "I don't know, old man. Maybe she's an intermediary. Maybe she was dragged in. Maybe she knows more than you think. But one thing is for sure, Cross doesn't work alone. Someone at the Pinnacle is covering him, and that someone is high up." Alex squeezed the printout until the paper crumpled. He didn't want to think of Kate as an accomplice, but the numbers didn't lie. She received money. She signed the documents. She lied to him every day, looking him in the eyes. "What's next?" he asked, his voice firm despite the storm within. Nathan closed the folder. "I'll keep digging, but you need to be careful. If Cross finds out you're prying into his business, it won't just end with him getting fired. Such people play dirty." Alex nodded, his thoughts already racing ahead. He was not a hero. He was not a fighter. But he was an accountant, and his weapons are numbers, facts, and evidence. He will collect them as he has collected all his life. And when the time comes, he will use them. Not for revenge, not yet. For the sake of truth. When he left the bar, the night was cold, and the stars above the city seemed distant, indifferent. He squeezed the flash drive in his pocket, where the new data from Nathan was now stored. The shadow of an old friend gave him a weapon, but the battle was only ahead, and he was not going to lose this battle. The silence in the Morgan house was not just emptiness. It was alive, like a shadow that creeps behind you, ready to pounce. After Alex unearthed suspicious payments through Keystone Consulting and linked them to Bradley Cross, vice president of the legal department of Pinnacle Enterprises, his life was torn in two. In one, he was Kate's husband, Sophie's stepfather, an accountant whose life ran according to schedule. In the other, he was a hunter whose analytical mind was looking for cracks in the ideal facade of their marriage. But nothing he found in the databases or received from Nathan could prepare him for what waited in the attic on Saturday, April 26th. The attic was a sanctuary of the past, where Alex rarely looked. Boxes of Christmas decorations, old suitcases, Sophie's childhood toys, which Kate kept with obsessive care. He went up there under the pretext of looking for an old file of tax documents. But in fact, he was drawn to something else, an instinct that whispered that the answers to questions about Kate and Cross might be here. His accounting mind demanded facts, and his heart, although he did not want to admit it, sought the truth, no matter how painful it was. The stairs to the attic creaked under his steps. Every sound echoed in the empty house like a warning. Kate was away at another house, showing Sophie was with a friend, and Alex was left alone with silence, which now seemed like his enemy. The attic smelled of dust, old wood, and something musty, like memories that no one wanted to touch. A single light bulb near the ceiling flickered, casting jagged shadows on the floor littered with boxes. Alex made his way between them, his fingers touching the cardboard covered with a thin layer of dust. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he felt it was there. His gaze fell on the box labeled Personal Kate. The writing was in her neat handwriting, but the edges of the cardboard were frayed as if the box had been opened and closed dozens of times. Alex paused, his hand hovering over the lid. It was an intrusion into her world, a violation of the boundaries she guarded so carefully. But he already crossed the line when he photographed the confidentiality agreement, when he started digging into the Pinnacle databases. He opened the box, and his heart began to pound. Inside were photographs stacked in an uneven pile. On the top is Kate, younger with her hair down, holding a baby in her arms. It was not Sophie. The child was too small for that age, and he had light, almost white hair, in contrast to Sophie's dark curls. Alex turned the photo over. On the back, it was written, Lucas, 3 months, 2019. His breath hitched. Lucas, a name he had never heard. He looked through other photographs. Kate with the same child in the park. Kate feeding him with a bottle. Kate smiling but with tired eyes. All the pictures were of a boy, and none of them were of himself. Under the photographs lay an envelope, yellowed and without inscriptions. Alex opened it, his fingers trembling as if he knew he would find something that would change everything. There were documents inside. The first is a birth certificate. Child's name, Lucas James Wilson. Date of birth, February 12, 2019. Mother, Caitlin and Wilson. Father, Bradley James Cross. Alex froze, his eyes glaring at the name. Bradley Cross. Not a random lover from Kate's past. Not someone she might have forgotten to mention. Bradley Cross. The man whose signature was on the confidentiality agreement, whose money flowed into Kate's accounts, whose shadow now loomed over their marriage. Lucas, a boy who was now 6 years old, was their son, a son Alex knew nothing about. He pulled out the next document, his movements mechanical. It was a declaration of abandonment signed by Bradley Cross, dated March 2019, a month after Lucas was born. In it, Cross renounced all rights and responsibilities to the child, transferring full custody to Kate. But behind that document was another that made his blood run cold. A declaration of abandonment of the child signed by Caitlin Wilson, dated the same March 2019. Kate also abandoned Lucas, agreeing to adopt him. The note read, the child was put up for adoption by mutual consent of the parents. Alex sank to the floor of the attic, his birth certificate still in his hand. His mind refused to accept it. Kate gave birth to a son, from Cross. 6 years ago, when they were already married, when Sophie was still a child, when he thought that their life was a family, albeit not an ideal one. She didn't just hide it from him. She gave the child away, erased him from her life, locked him in that box like a secret that was never meant to come out. And Cross, this man he saw at office parties with his expensive suit and predatory smile, was the father of this child. And Kate was complicit in this lie. He tried to remember 2019, searching his memory for signs he had missed. And suddenly it seemed to hit him. 7 years ago, from late 2017 to early 2019, he was abroad. Pinnacle Enterprises sent him to Singapore on a 1-year, 4-month contract to get their new subsidiary in line with its financial statements. It was hard work, but he agreed because he and Kate dreamed of a house, this very house on Willow Street, with white shutters and a spacious kitchen. He worked 16 hours a day, returned to his tiny rented apartment, and called Kate on Skype, listening to her talk about Sophie, about her real estate deals, about how she was saving for their future. She never complained, never seemed strange. But now he realized she was pregnant. She carried Cross's baby while he was on the other side of the world, breaking his back for their dream. How could she hide it? He remembered their calls, her face on the screen, her smile, which now seemed like a mask to him. She said that she had gained weight because of stress, that she wore loose dresses because fashion had changed. He believed her, he trusted her, and she must have planned everything, the birth, the adoption, the abandonment. She knew he would return in a few months, and by then Lucas would be given away, erased from her life like a mistake that could be erased. Alex squeezed the certificate so that the paper crumpled. His fingers trembled, but he didn't feel angry yet. It was something deeper, colder, like an icy needle piercing his heart. He thought about Sophie, how he tried to be her father despite her walls. He thought about Kate, about her cold looks, about her late returns, about her lies. But this was not just betrayal. It was the destruction of everything he considered his family. He carefully put the documents back into the envelope, but did not put them in the box. Instead, he put them in his jacket pocket. He didn't know what to do with them, but he knew he couldn't leave them here. They were proof not just of Kate's lies, but also of her connection to Cross, which went back many months to those months when he was thousands of miles away, building their future. He closed the box, put it in its place, and descended from the attic, his steps heavy, as if he was carrying the entire house on his shoulders. In the kitchen, he poured himself a whiskey for the 5th time that week, although he had previously only drunk on special occasions. He sat down at the island, looking at the envelope in front of him. His phone vibrated with a message from Nathan, found another account. Cross transferred money through Cayman in 2019. I'll call you tomorrow. Alex didn't answer. He couldn't think about bills, about Keystone, about Project Capital. All this now seemed trivial compared to what he was holding in his hands. Kate returned home around midnight. He heard the door open, her kick off her shoes, and the rustle of her cloak. She entered the kitchen, her eyes sliding over him, over the glass in his hand, over the envelope on the table. For a second, her face trembled barely noticeable, but Alex, who now saw every shadow of her, noticed it. The silence in the Morgan house became for Alex not just a background, but a cage where every sound, the creaking of a door, the rustle of footsteps, the ringing of a telephone, was potential evidence. After finding in the attic the birth certificate of Lucas, the son of Kate and Bradley Cross, and documents about their mutual abandonment of the child, Alex realized that it was useless to ask. Kate was a master of lies. Her words flowed like water, leaving no trace. He didn't want her explanation. He wanted facts, and if the truth was somewhere in this house, he was going to find it. The decision to install hidden cameras did not come immediately. Alex has never been a person who intrudes into other people's lives. He was an accountant whose job was to find errors in numbers, not in people. But now the numbers had failed him, and instinct demanded action. He could no longer live in this house, pretending that everything was normal, knowing that Kate hid her son from him, that she was connected to Cross not only with money, but also with a past that she buried. The cameras were his way of looking behind the veil without giving himself away. He ordered a set of equipment online through an anonymous account that he created specifically for this purpose. We need help. It was a lie, but a plausible one. His father, William Morgan, lived in a small town 3 hours away, and although he did complain about his health, Alex was not going to see him. Kate nodded, her eyes empty as always. "Say hi to him," she said, scrolling through her phone. "Call me if anything happens." Of course, he answered, already knowing that he wouldn't call. He packed a small backpack, a laptop, flash drives, a change of clothes, and left on Friday evening, leaving the Tesla in the office parking lot. Instead, he rented a nondescript sedan through an app, using a company card to avoid leaving a trace. His plan was simple. Use these 2 days to lay the foundation for a new life, a life where Kate and Cross couldn't find him. The first step was a new bank account. On Saturday morning, he arrived in a small town in a neighboring state where no one knew his name. He chose a local bank whose advertising promised quick account openings, no questions asked. Using a fake ID purchased via the dark web for a few bitcoins, he opened an account in the name of James Clark. It was a high-quality forgery, a driver's license, a suburban address, even a fake social security number that would withstand cursory scrutiny. Alex wasn't a criminal, but years of working with financial records had taught him how to cover his tracks. He transferred $5,000 from one of his old investment accounts into the account, disguising the transaction as an advising fee. It was a small start, but enough to get started. The next step was an apartment. He found an ad on a rental website, a one-room studio in a working-class area where no one asked questions. The owner, an elderly man with a tired look, agreed to cash and did not require a long-term contract. Alex, introducing himself as James Clark, signed a 3-month lease, paying in advance. The apartment was cramped with peeling paint and a damp smell, but it was his refuge. He didn't intend to live there yet, but it was a place he could disappear to when the time came. The SIM card was the finishing touch. He bought a prepaid phone and SIM card from a rundown electronics store using cash. The salesman, a bored guy with tattoos, didn't even look at him. Alex activated the number, connecting it to the anonymous messenger he used to contact Nathan. This was his spare channel, free from the eyes of Kate or anyone else who might be watching. On Sunday, he returned to the city, but not home. He spent the day at a motel on the outskirts, checking security footage. Kate spent the weekend, as usual, house showings, calls, late dinner with Sophie. Nothing suspicious, except for one late-night conversation that the camera in the kitchen caught on Saturday at 11:14 p.m. Kate sat at the island, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Don't call here." I said, "Not now. Everything is under control." She hung up the call and finished her wine, her face as cold as marble. Alex saved the post, adding it to his collection. He didn't know who she was talking to, but he suspected Cross. It was always Cross. Creating a new image was not just a practical step for Alex. It was a way to distance himself from the pain, from the betrayal, from the knowledge that his marriage was a lie. He thought back to Singapore, those 16 months when he had worked until he was exhausted, so that he and Kate could buy this house. He remembered her calls, her smile on the screen, her words. "We can handle it, Alex. This is for us." Meanwhile, she was carrying Cross's child, planning his adoption, building her secret life. Every new account, every forged document was an act of liberation for him from her, from their past, from the person he was. But Sophie was his weakness. He thought about her as he sat in the motel, looking at his phone screen where camera notifications were flashing. She was not his daughter, but he loved her as if he were his own. Her rebellious look, her purple locks, her silent aloofness, it was all part of his world. He didn't know how to leave her, how to explain why he would disappear. But he knew he couldn't stay in the house where Kate and Cross were still playing their games. On Sunday evening, he returned home, his face a mask of fatigue. Kate was in the living room, leafing through a magazine. She looked up, her smile polite but empty. "How's your father?" she asked, her voice smooth as always. "Better," he replied, looking past her. "But we will need to go again." Of course, she nodded, returning to the magazine. "Let me know if anything happens." Alex walked into his office, closed the door, and checked the flash drives. Everything was there, records, documents, his new life, packaged in digital files. He looked at the screen where the camera app showed an empty living room and felt the gap grow wider. He prepared himself for the moment he would disappear, the moment he would step into her, leaving Kate and Cross behind. But while he was here, in this house, under their gaze, he had to play his part. And he played coldly, calculatingly, like a man who knows that time is on his side. Nathan Lawson, his old friend from university, now an IRS analyst, was the first person he approached. They met on Monday, May 12th, at the same bar, the Rusty Anchor, where the lights were dim and the patrons asked no questions. Nathan sat at a corner table, a bottle of beer in front of him, and his face was a mixture of fatigue and curiosity. "You look like you're planning to rob a bank," he said, as Alex sat down across from him. "What's this time? Another offshore of Cross?" Alex shook his head, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I need a plan, not just data, something that will hit Kate financially, but so that I remain clean." Nathan squinted, taking a sip of his beer. "Damn, old man, this is no longer just digging into taxes." "You want war?" "Not wars," Alex corrected. "Justice. She lied to me for years. She and Cross, they ruined my life. I want her to lose what is important to her. Money, reputation, safety." Nathan tapped his fingers on the bottle, his gaze sharp. "Do you understand that this is a risk? If she or Cross suspect you're digging, they might strike first. And this Cross of yours is not one of those who plays fair." "That's why I'm here," Alex said. "You know how to do it quietly. And I don't want to break the law." Nathan chuckled, but there was a sparkle in his eyes, the same one that appeared at the university when they solved difficult problems. "Okay, what are you up to?" Alex expressed the idea that had been brewing in his head ever since he saw Kate and Cross kiss. The plan was daring, but legally clear, to set up a financial trap for Kate disguised as her own decision. He wanted to arrange loans in her name that would lead to a controlled bankruptcy, but in such a way that she herself signed all the documents, not understanding their true meaning. It was a crime without breaking the law, a manipulation that exploited her trust and inattention. "It's possible," Nathan said slowly, thinking it over. "But you need someone who understands the legal intricacies. I can check tax holes, find ways to disguise transactions, but I need a specialist for the documents. Someone who doesn't ask too many questions." "I know such a person," said Alex. "Linda Carter." Linda Carter was a freelance lawyer whom Alex had crossed paths with several years ago, when Pinnacle Enterprises hired her to draft contracts. She was a woman in her 50s with a sharp mind and a reputation for being able to bend the law without breaking it. Linda did not work for large companies. She took on private orders, often for those who wanted to remain in the shadows. Alex contacted her via encrypted messenger using his anonymous number. He introduced himself as James Clark, his new pseudonym, and suggested meeting at a coffee shop on the outskirts of town. The meeting took place on Tuesday, May 13th. Linda sat at a table in the corner, her gray hair pulled back into a neat bun and her thin framed glasses, giving her the look of a stern school teacher. But her eyes were cold, like a poker player's. "Mr. Clark," she said as Alex sat down opposite her. "You mentioned a delicate matter." "I'm listening." Alex spoke carefully, not revealing personal details. He explained that he wanted to execute a series of financial documents that would lead to the bankruptcy of a certain person, but in a way that made it look like their own decision. He mentioned loans, consolidation of assets, signatures that will be obtained under the pretext of optimizing finances. Linda listened in silence, her fingers tapping her coffee cup. When he finished, she leaned closer. "It's possible," she said, "but it's expensive and risky. If your client guesses what he is signing, it could turn against you. Are you sure you're ready?" "I'm sure," Alex replied, his voice firm. "Name the price." Linda named the amount $20,000 half in advance. Alex agreed, knowing that he could cover it from his savings by disguising the transfer through several dummy accounts. They agreed that Linda would prepare the paperwork in a week, and Nathan would help with the financial part, so that everything would look legal. The plan was complex but elegant. Alex began by suggesting to Kate that they combine their finances. On the evening of Wednesday, May 14th, he struck up a conversation over dinner, his tone businesslike, as if it were a common idea. "I thought," he said, looking at the plate, "we could restructure our accounts, simplify taxes, reduce costs." The office was talking about debt consolidation. It could save us a couple thousand a year. Kate looked up from her phone, her gaze wary but not suspicious. Consolidation? How is that? We take out loans in your name, he explained, knowing that her credit history was better. We pay off small debts, combine everything into one payment. Less interest, less headaches. She nodded, her interest superficial. Sounds reasonable. Will you do it? Of course, he said, hiding his relief. I will prepare the documents. You just need signatures. Kate agreed without going into detail. She trusted him in financial matters, or rather, she was too lazy to figure it out. This was his advantage. He knew that she would sign without reading if he presented it as a routine thing. Linda and Nathan worked quickly. By Friday, May 16th, Linda had given Alex a set of documents, loan applications, restructuring agreements, forms to sign. It was all designed to look like standard debt consolidation, but with a trap. The loans Kate would sign were tied to phony assets that Nathan helped disguise through a chain of transactions. If Kate can't pay them off, and she can't, given the amounts and interest involved, her credit will collapse and her assets, including her home, will be in danger of bankruptcy. Legally, she herself agreed to all the conditions, not knowing what she was signing. Alex added the finishing touch. He arranged several small loans in Kate's name through online platforms, using her details, which he knew by heart. These were small amounts, but they created the appearance of financial chaos that Linda had built into the plan. If anyone starts digging, it will look like Kate got into debt herself and couldn't keep up with her expenses. On Sunday, May 18th, Alex brought the documents home. Kate was in the living room, leafing through a magazine. He placed the folder on the table, his voice level. "This is for consolidation," he said. "Sign it, and I'll send it to the bank tomorrow." Kate picked up the pen, and her eyes skimmed the first page, but didn't linger. She signed all the sheets without asking questions. Her signature was sweeping and confident. Alex looked at her, and his heart sank not from guilt, but from the realization of how easily she had been taken. She trusted him, or she didn't care. The plan was launched. Linda sent the documents to the banks. Nathan disguised the transactions, and Alex continued to play his role. He knew that bankruptcy would not happen overnight. It would be several months before Kate felt the effects. But when this happens, she will find herself in a financial abyss from which she will not get out without losses. And most importantly, no one can blame him. It was a crime without breaking the law, as clean as a ledger. When he went to bed that night, in the guest room where he now lived, he stared at the ceiling, feeling the abyss grow deeper. He didn't know what would happen next, whether he would disappear as planned or stay to watch Kate's world crumble. But he knew one thing. He was no longer a victim. He was a player, and his move was made. On Friday, May 23rd, Alex announced to Kate that he was going to a business meeting in a nearby city. "Client from Pinnacle," he said, putting the laptop into his backpack. "I'll be back late." His voice was even as if he were talking about the weather. Kate nodded, not looking up from her phone, her face blank as always. "Good luck," she said, her tone polite but indifferent. Sophie was upstairs, her music blaring through the closed door. Alex stopped at the stairs, his hand gripping the railing. He wanted not to say something, but he couldn't. He loved her despite all the walls she erected, but it was impossible to say goodbye. It would ruin the plan. He left the house, got into his Tesla, and drove away, knowing that he would never return. He headed to the bridge on the outskirts of town, an old rusty structure over the river where cars rarely appeared. The location was not chosen by chance. The river was deep, the current was strong, and there were no surveillance cameras nearby. He parked the car on the side of the road, leaving the keys in the ignition. In the glove compartment, he left his wallet, driver's license, and several work documents, enough for police to believe he was there. He smashed his phone, an old iPhone, with a hammer that he bought at a hardware store for cash. He threw the fragments into the river, but first removed the SIM card and destroyed it separately. The final touch was the note. He wrote it by hand on a piece of paper from a notepad that he took from the office. The text was short and deliberately vague. "I can't do it anymore. Sorry, Alex." He didn't want melodrama, but he knew the note had to be convincing. He placed it on the passenger's seat, crumpling it slightly as if he was riding in a hurry. He then put on gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, took a backpack containing a new ID, cash, and an anonymous phone number, and left on foot, disappearing into the darkness. Kate learned of his disappearance the next morning, Saturday, May 24th. Police found the car near the bridge around 7 a.m. after a call from a driver who spotted the abandoned Tesla. Officers contacted Kate and she arrived on scene, her face pale and her eyes wide. Alex watched this from afar, sitting in a rented sedan half a kilometer from the bridge. He saw her talking to the police, how her hands were shaking, how she looked at the river as if expecting him to surface. It wasn't anger, it wasn't relief, it was shock, pure and unadulterated. She didn't expect him to be capable of this. The police declared him missing. They searched the river, but found nothing, no body, no traces. The note and the broken phone became the main evidence, and the investigator, an elderly man with a tired look, assumed suicide. Work pressure, family problems, he told Kate, leafing through the report. These things happen. Kate was silent, her fingers clutching her purse, but she was not crying. Not then. Alex followed the developments through the news and an anonymous messenger, where Nathan sent him updates. Nathan was the only one who knew the truth, and even he didn't ask too many questions. "Are you sure you want to pull this off?" he once wrote. Alex replied, "I'm sure." Nathan didn't argue anymore. A week later, police officially closed the case, classifying it as a probable suicide. Pinnacle Enterprises issued a condolence message, with colleagues whispering about how Alex was always so quiet. Kate organized a memorial service of funeral without a body, as the local news called it. The ceremony took place on May 31st in a small church on the outskirts of the city. Alex watched her from a car parked 2 blocks away. He saw Kate standing at the altar in a black dress, her eyes red, but her tears flowing sparingly, as if she could not afford any more. Sophie was nearby. Her face was pale, her eyes empty. She didn't cry, but her hands shook as she clutched the service program. Alex felt a pang of pain as he looked at her, but he forced himself to look away. It was his choice. Bradley Cross was there too. Alex spotted his black SUV in the church parking lot. Cross was the last to enter the church, his suit immaculate, his face impenetrable. He didn't approach Kate or speak to Sophie, but his presence was like a shadow hanging over the ceremony. Alex looked at him through the binoculars, his fingers gripping the steering wheel. Cross didn't look grieving. He looked like a man weighing the consequences. Alex moved into his one-room apartment under the name James Clark. The walls were bare, the furniture was cheap, but this was his space, free of Kate's lies. He followed the news, checked the footage from the cameras that were still running in the Morgan house. Kate returned to her routine a few days after the funeral, showing houses, calling returning late. But the cameras caught her late-night conversations, her whispers in the kitchen. He couldn't do it. It's not in his character. She was talking to someone possibly Cross. But her voice was hesitant, as if she was searching for answers. Sophie has changed. The camera showed her sitting in the living room, staring into space, her phone lying idle. She didn't turn on the music or slam the door. She was lost, and it cut Alex deeper than he expected. He knew he had hurt her, but he convinced himself that it was necessary. He will protect her later when the truth about Kate and Cross comes out, when his bankruptcy plan works. Alex watched everything from afar. His new life was like a shadow of his old one. He worked remotely, using fake data, providing accounting consulting to small firms. His anonymous phone was the only channel of communication with Nathan, who continued to dig into Cross's affairs. The plan moved forward. Loans were issued in Kate's name, and the first payments were already overdue. Soon she will feel the pressure, and then her world will begin to crumble. He sat in his apartment, looking at the laptop screen where camera footage was flashing. Kate cried at the funeral. Sophie was distraught. Cross watched. It was his dramatization, his performance, and he played it flawlessly. But deep down he knew that the chasm he had created was not just for Kate. She was there for him too, and he still didn't know if he could get out. The first blow came on Monday, June 2nd. Kate was trying to pay for coffee at her regular cafe when her card was declined. She frowned, muttered an apology, and pulled out another one same story. Returning home, she logged into her bank account and saw a notification. Account frozen due to suspicion of fraudulent activity. Her heart began to pound. She called the bank, but the manager, whose voice was polite but adamant, said that the matter had been referred to the fraud department. She has received a report of unusual transactions, Mrs. Morgan. You will need to appear in person with documentation. Kate sat at the kitchen island, staring at her laptop screen, her fingers trembling. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't know that the loans Alex had arranged in her name under the guise of financial consolidation were deliberately obfuscated, creating the appearance of financial chaos. The Carter, a lawyer, prepared the documents so that each of Kate's signatures looked like her own decision. And Nathan disguised the transactions through dummy accounts so that they would attract the attention of the bank. This was not a system failure. This was the first domino to fall in the chain that Alex had built. The second blow came on Wednesday, June 4th. In the morning, the doorbell rang and Kate, still in her pajamas, opened it, waiting for the courier. Instead, standing in the doorway were two people in sharp suits, a man and a woman, both wearing IRS badges. Kate Lynn Morgan, the man asked, his voice dry as paper. We're from the IRS. We need to discuss your income for the last 3 years. Kate felt the floor disappear from under her feet. She invited them into the living room, her movements mechanical. They asked questions about her real estate transactions, about payments from Keystone Consulting, about invoices she had never seen. She tried to explain that it was a mistake, that she wasn't doing anything illegal, but her voice was shaking and their gazes were cold, like camera lenses. Nathan, using his connections at the IRS, initiated an audit based on data that he himself had collected. He didn't fabricate evidence. He simply shined a light on evidence that already existed, linking Kate to Cross's suspicious transactions. The IRS hasn't seen Alex. They only saw her. Kate spent the entire day rummaging through her old reports, trying to find an explanation, but the deeper she dug, the more confused she became. She called her accountant, but he was evasive, citing being busy. She called Brad Cross, but his number was unavailable. For the first time in years, she felt like the network she thought was her protection was beginning to break. The third blow came on Friday, June 6th. Kate was in the office of her real estate company when the manager called her. He was polite, but his words cut like a knife. Kate, we have received a complaint, conflict of interest. Your dealings with Pinnacle Enterprises have raised questions. We'll have to part ways. She tried to object, but he raised his hand. This is not being discussed. Lawyers are already preparing documents. Kate walked out of the office, her face burning. She didn't know that the complaint was anonymous, sent through a fake address that Alex created using Nathan's information about her connection. This was not a direct accusation, just a hint, convincing enough that the company would rather get rid of it than deal with it. Her reputation, which she had built over the years, began to come apart at the seams. She returned home, her hands shaking as she opened the door. Sophie was in the living room, staring at her phone, but looked up when she noticed her state. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost scared. Kate forced a smile. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just work." But nothing was normal. She felt the walls closing in. The fourth blow was the hardest. On Saturday, June 7th, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was the bailiff, whose face was devoid of emotion. He handed Kate a notice. The house on Willow Street was foreclosed on due to outstanding loans. The amounts stated in the document were staggering hundreds of thousands of dollars that she had no idea about. She tried to explain that it was a mistake, that she did not take out such loans, but the bailiff just shrugged. "You need to go to court, Mrs. Morgan. For now, the house is under arrest." Kate stood in the hallway, clutching the notice, her breathing ragged. She didn't know that Alex, with Linda's help, had arranged the loans to look like she had initiated them. Every document she signed was part of a trap leading to bankruptcy. The house that she and Alex had built as a symbol of their dreams was now a prison for her that she could not leave and could not hold. She dialed Cross's number again, but he didn't answer. She left dozens of messages, her voice changing from pleading to rage, but the answer was silence. Bradley Cross, the man who was her shadow, her partner, her old connection, was gone. He went into the shadows as he always did when it smelled hot. Kate realized that he would not come. Not this time. Kate was left alone. The bank froze her accounts. The IRS dug into her past. Her job was lost. Her home was at risk. Sophie, who was already distant, now looked at her with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked one day, her voice trembling. Kate didn't know what to answer. She tried to hold on, but her world was falling apart faster than she could pick up the pieces. She sat in the kitchen at night, looking at the empty island where she and Alex once drank coffee in the morning. She remembered his disappearance, the note in the car, his broken phone. She thought it was suicide, that he had broken under pressure that she did not notice. But now that her life was falling apart, she began to doubt. Was this his revenge? Did he know about Cross, about Lucas, about the money? She drove away these thoughts, but they returned like shadows in the dark. Kate cried, but not in front of Sophie. She cried in her room, behind a closed door where no one could see her. She lost everything: her career, her reputation, her home, Brad, Alex. She was left with a daughter who barely spoke to her, and with the feeling that the abyss into which she had fallen had not been dug by accident. Alex watched this from his studio apartment under the name James Clark. He followed the news, Nathan's messages, the cameras that were still running in the house. He saw Kate answering calls from the bank, how she argued with the bailiff, how she sat in the kitchen, staring into space. He saw Sophie, whose face was becoming increasingly closed, and felt a stab of pain, but he did not allow himself to stop. His plan worked. Kate was in the hole he had created, and legally he was clear. Bankruptcy, inspections, arrest of the house, all this was the result of her own signatures, her inattention, her lies. But the victory did not bring him joy. He looked at the screen, where Kate was crying, and felt only emptiness. The abyss swallowed not only her. She swallowed them all. Alex's days flowed along a quiet schedule, like an accounting spreadsheet with everything in its place. In the morning, he drank coffee at a local diner, where the waitress, a girl with freckles, called him James and did not bother him. By day, he worked remotely, providing accounting advice to small firms through anonymous platforms. His clients did not know his face, only his electronic signature and account number. The work was simple, almost mechanical, leaving his mind free, or rather empty. In the evenings, he wrote a book. It started out casually as a way to organize my thoughts, but became a ritual. He called it Ethics in the Shadows, How Corporations Eat People. This wasn't an expose on Pinnacle Enterprises or Cross. He was too careful to leave any traces. These were reflections on how systems built on lies break those who believe in them. He wrote about nameless people whose lives were crumbling under the weight of other people's ambitions. But in every line he saw himself, Kate, Lucas, Sophie. He wrote slowly in the light of a table lamp, while the waves crashed against the shore outside the window. The book was his confession, but he knew that he would most likely never publish it. His new life was invisible. Nobody in the town knew who he was. No one asked why he avoided talking about the past, why he had no friends or family. Locals saw him as a quiet guest who paid on time and sometimes sat on a bench by the pier, looking at the horizon. The police closed his case long ago, concluding that Alex Morgan drowned in the river. Kate, whose life had collapsed under house arrest and tax audits, did not look for him if she suspected the truth. She did not have the strength to dig. Bradley Cross disappeared from her life like a shadow, leaving her alone. Even Nathan, his only ally, respected his silence. Alex was freer than ever, but freedom did not bring peace. The hatred that burned in him when he found Lucas's birth certificate, when he saw Kate and Cross kiss, when he took out loans in her name, did not go away. She did not fade away, did not dissolve. She simply changed, becoming empty, cold, and deep, like the ocean outside his window. He thought that defeating Kate, her financial ruin, her loneliness would fill that void, but it only deepened it. He won, but did not feel triumphant. Sometimes he remembered Sophie, her purple locks, her rebellious look, her silence at the funeral without a body. He saw on the news that she was staying with Kate in the house, which was now under arrest. He imagined her sitting in her room, listening to music, trying to understand why her world had fallen apart. He wanted to write to her, explain that he didn't leave because of her, but he couldn't. Any letter, any call could ruin his new life. He left her in the past, just as he left Kate, Lucas himself. At night, he lay in the dark, listening to the creaking of the house and the distant sound of the waves. He thought about the book, about the words he wrote. Freedom is not the end of the road. It is the beginning of emptiness. He was free, but this freedom was the password to a life where there was nothing but himself. He looked at the ceiling, and his thoughts were like waves, endless, monotonous, empty. 6 months had passed since he settled on the East Coast, in a small coastal town, where no one knew his past. It was morning, and he was sitting in a small cafe on the corner of the main street, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the salty wind from the ocean. His table by the window overlooked the park, where children ran across the grass, their laughter ringing like bells, distant and clear. Alex drank espresso, his fingers resting on his battered laptop, where he was finishing the next chapter of his book on corporate ethics. He didn't look at the screen. His gaze was drawn to the children in the park, a boy kicking a ball, a girl with pigtails swinging on a swing. They reminded him of Sophie, of her childhood, which he tried to preserve until their world collapsed. He thought about her less often now, but every time it was like a prick, sharp and deep. On his phone, lying next to him, the screen was glowing. There was a photo of an old house on Willow Street, with white shutters and a neat lawn. He found it in a news article he discovered by chance while checking local websites. It wasn't nostalgia. It was an anchor, a reminder of what he had left behind. He didn't regret it, but he didn't forget either. The woman approached his table. Her steps were light, almost inaudible. She was about 40, with short brown hair and a smile that seemed genuine. Her name was Emma. She worked in a cafe and sometimes exchanged a few words with him, calling him James. She didn't know who he was, and that was his salvation. Back to the book, she asked, nodding towards the laptop. Her voice was warm, without a hint of curiosity. "I'm trying," he replied, smiling back. His smile was soft, but did not reach his eyes. Sometimes words don't want to come together. "It happens," she said, placing a fresh cup of coffee in front of him, although he didn't ask for it. "Take your time. They will be found." She went to serve another table, and Alex looked after her, feeling strangely relieved. Emma was part of his new life, not close, not important, but real. She didn't know about Kate, about Lucas, about Sophie, about the plan he pulled off. She saw him as just a man who drinks coffee and writes, and that was enough. He picked up the phone, his finger hovering over the screen. The photo of the house was replaced by a news headline, which he noticed out of the corner of his eye. Former lawyer gave interview about ruined life. He didn't open the article, but he knew who it was about. Kate. Her world collapsed just as he had planned. Frozen accounts, tax audits, job loss, house foreclosure. He saw snippets of news, messages from Nathan, the latest camera footage as they worked. She was left alone, with Sophie, without Bradley Cross, without support. He achieved his goal, but the victory was as empty as the cup he had finished. Alex turned his gaze to the park. The boy with the ball fell, but immediately stood up, laughing. A girl on a swing was waving to someone. Life went on, bright and carefree, behind the glass of the cafe, outside his world. He was free, but freedom did not fill the void. She only gave him a space where he could exist quietly, unnoticeably, like a shadow. He closed the laptop, left the money on the table, and went outside. The sun was shining softly, the wind smelled of salt. He walked to the pier where the waves crashed against the rocks, and thought that perhaps one day he would write the last chapter. Not about Kate, not about Cross, not about Lucas, about myself. But for now he just walked, and his steps were the only sound in his silence. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you. And go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one. Thank you for taking the time to read this story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe, like, and share in the comments. Remember, history is a witness to the past, a light of truth, a living memory, a teacher of life, a messenger of antiquity, and see you soon.